Saudi Arabia is the Middle East's biggest economy, and it has lofty ambitions to attract international companies to set up regional headquarters in Riyadh in order to become one of the most prominent business hubs of the region. These plans are part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, launched by Prince Mohammed bin Salman in order to modernize Saudi Arabia's economy and develop public service sectors such as health, education, and infrastructure. In line with the objectives of Vision 2030, diverse developments have been considered concerning corporate governance and sustainability. And attracting foreign investment is considered as one of the approaches to accomplishing one of the vision's targets. Here today to discuss the Kingdom's corporate governance and sustainability journey is Dr. Mariam Ali Ficocello, Chief Governance Officer of the Red Sea Development Company, and Jane Valls, Executive Director of the GCC Board Directors Institute. Welcome to you both. Dr. Mariam, let's start with you. You've worked in corporate governance for over a decade across a broad range of sectors such as real estate, aviation, healthcare, and manufacturing. How has corporate governance evolved?
Thank you, Leah. So I think we are seeing a much more mature view on corporate governance. Back in the mid-2000s, when corporate governance started coming into Saudi Arabia and we had corporates take interest in it, I think it began with more of a focus on trying to comply with different regulations as they became available. But we're seeing more and more maturity in that space where companies are becoming more interested in implementing corporate governance in their early stages of their development. We're also seeing interest from family businesses, which don't need to comply with any corporate governance standards, but are choosing to put into place corporate governance because they really see value in the long-term return on investments that corporate governance can bring to them. We're also seeing changes in kind of the focus. So for a long time, there was a big focus on creating shareholder value. We're seeing more focus on accountability, transparency, and of course, that's also perhaps a response to the shareholders becoming a bit more or asking their boards to be more accountable. And then finally, another new and emerging area in corporate governance in Saudi Arabia is really around the sustainability piece. And I think it's a natural development given the different sustainability standards that have come up, but also the bigger interest from consumers in seeing more sustainability. And of course, I'm referring to environmental, social, and economic sustainability. So those are the areas that we're seeing changing and evolving in Saudi Arabia at the moment.
Interesting. And of course, we're going to delve into those topics and in particular sustainability further into this discussion. And Jane, you have 2 decades of international corporate governance under your belt, having worked with leading companies, including British Airways. Have big corporations understood that solid and progressive corporate governance and business success go hand in hand?
I think they have, Lee. I think that as Mariam pointed out, there's a maturity spectrum, and I think that we're moving along that maturity spectrum at a fairly fast pace, actually, encouraged obviously by the regulators. But it's a journey, as they say, right? And I think that there are some companies who are moving along the maturity spectrum faster than others, and there are others who are still at the beginning. We have a healthy dose of skepticism about corporate governance, as you do in any other part of the world. But I think that there is a much deeper understanding about the importance of corporate governance in general, how to apply it, and we are seeing greater adoption of good practice and best practice, not just compliance, because compliance is the start, right? And you move into corporate governance from there. I think that, as Mariam said, the idea that a director on a board was sort of an honorary position is long gone now, and we are moving into a clear I think, sort of era, if you like, where the board directors clearly understand that they've got responsibilities, they've got legal duties, and they've got liabilities as well, and that the regulators will not hesitate to enforce the regulations as they feel they should. So I think we're in a good place at the moment along this spectrum. The other thing that I would just say is that I think we at the Board Directors Institute here in the Gulf are a little bit of a thermometer, or if you like, or a barometer of corporate governance, because nobody has to come to us for professional development, for board evaluations. But we've seen the numbers increase substantially. And in order to become a member of the Institute, you've got to have gone through one of our professional development programs. We now have over 2,100 members. And that, as I say, is increasing exponentially every year. And so that engagement, I think, is an extremely positive sign in the region of the understanding of the importance of corporate governance and board effectiveness.
Fantastic. And Dr. Mariam, you are currently Chief Governance Officer at the Red Sea Development, a company that is building and promoting regenerative tourism along Saudi Arabia's west coast. Saudi Arabia has launched its 2030 vision, of course, which intends to build the best future for Saudi Arabia. Tell us how the Red Sea project fits in with this vision.
Thank you, Lee. Basically, the Vision 2030 was really Saudi Arabia's strategy for the next number of years, starting from 2015 all the way to 2030. And as part of that vision, there's a big focus on diversifying the Saudi economy away from oil. To do that, tourism was chosen as one of the new sectors that Saudi Arabia would like to get into. And of course, the Red Sea Development Company is one of the projects that are trying to deliver that vision. So we're essentially a tourism project. We have a huge focus on the new and interesting piece on tourism, which is, of course, sustainability. And even beyond sustainability, we look at regenerative tourism. Our focus, of course, and the vision's focus was also to look into sustainability, the importance of sustainability for us as a country and as a nation. And that really is something that we're committed to at the Red Sea project as well. Another point that I'd like to point out is, as part of our as part of our sustainability ambition, we focus on not only the environmental tourism, the environmental sustainability. That's a piece I think that comes to people's minds when they think about sustainability. But we look at sustainability in the more holistic approach of the economic, social, and environmental sustainability. So for us on the social side, we have a big focus on creating jobs, on empowering local communities, and ensuring that the return on all the local communities and on Saudi Arabia as a nation is also long-term and sustainable. On the economic side, our project has long-term plans to continue being a developer beyond 2030 and to ensure that we have sustainable returns on all the investments that have been made from both our shareholders as well as from our stakeholders, whether they're our employees, our customers, or the local communities. So that's the vision we are taking, and we hope to be responding and a key enabler of the Vision 2030 with what we're trying to deliver.
And Jane, you just mentioned that you work with a broad range of companies. Do you see Vision 2030 as being adopted by your clients and the companies that you work with? And how is this affecting their corporate governance strategy?
Oh, absolutely. I think we see every company just about in Saudi Arabia in some shape or form, and companies also outside Saudi Arabia who are interested in the developments taking place in Saudi, taking notice and adopting Vision 2030 in some way, whether it's the private sector, with the ambition to now be at the front of the train of economic development, and seizing the new opportunities that exist within this framework, or whether it's government entities that are being corporatized as part of the new vision, or whether it's the ministries themselves that are there to support the delivery of Vision 2030. So there is a huge amount of work going on in every aspect, I think, of life and the economy in Saudi Arabia to move towards this very ambitious vision that 2030, and this very exciting ambition that 2030 provides. And I think that we do see a huge amount of engagement. How does it manifest itself in terms of corporate governance? Well, I think, again, there's a clear understanding that if you want to move from an emerging economy to a developed economy, then corporate governance is the cornerstone. And if you read Vision 2030, it is the cornerstone of Vision 2030, actually. And therefore, if you want to be a global player, or you want to play by international standards, or even create your own global standards, you've got to play by the international rules, and it starts with adopting good corporate governance practices. So we see, I think that is the key driver. It is definitely the key driver for companies adopting better corporate governance practices in different ways. Obviously, every company looks at it in a different way, and we see the Red Sea Development Company and Amala, with this great emphasis on sustainability and ESG, which are the leading sort of practices these days. And other companies, they're dealing with it from different perspectives, but I think that it's a big driver of corporate governance.
It's fantastic to have an all-woman panel today. Saudi Arabia is said to have gone from having the lowest female labour force participation in the world in 2018 to having 1 in 3 women working in 2020. That's a rapid improvement. Dr. Mariam, what is the Red Sea Development Company doing to encourage inclusion, diversity and equality as part of its corporate governance?
Leah, it's not the easiest thing for us. We are, of course, in a sector that is known to be, more attractive for men than women, the real estate development sector and the construction sector. However, we're working really hard to try and increase the number of females that we have in our workforce. We started off by trying to attract graduates. So we've been enforcing that any of our graduate programs or fresh graduate programs have to have a 50% female gender mix, of male to female gender ratio. We also currently have about 22% of our workforce represented by females, which we find is way lower than our ambition. We're hoping to increase that as well to 50%, but it's not easy. We have plans to target female engineers coming out of schools, as well as female engineers in general. And we recently increased the number of females on our advisory board. Previously, we had only 12% of females on our advisory board. We were able to increase that to 37%. So about a third of our advisory board now has females. We hope to be able to push females up the pipeline of executive representation as well in the future, but I'm sure that will take time. Embedded in our culture, we try and ensure that we have a very fair and collaborative, responsible culture that tries and enhances diversity and attracts diversity to the extent possible. We also follow the International Labour Organizations and the United Nations guidelines on trying to promote the values that we hope will improve diversity and encourage more females, as well as diverse members of the community to join our company. But as I said, it's one of the challenges that we are facing, but we're trying to tackle it and resolve it as fast and surely as we can.
That's really encouraging and inspiring to hear. And Jane, what do you think? as we just said, yeah, the figures are encouraging, steps are being taken, but it's not just about being able to work in Saudi Arabia, but also being able to break the glass ceiling and getting those C-level roles, especially given that women in Saudi Arabia are as likely as men to have university degrees. What are you seeing on that front, and what are your thoughts?
I think it's change. It's work in progress, right? But I think we're seeing some extremely positive changes and some extremely positive trends taking place. But you don't change, history overnight, and we're coming from a low base. And of course, in order to get women into the boardroom where you can effect change, or into the C-suite, you've got to have a pipeline. And that's what a lot of companies are in the process of really creating. And the thing about Saudi Arabia is that once it decides to do something, it works pretty fast to do it. But this will take time. It will take time. I think that it's not just sometimes the glass ceiling, but there's sometimes a sticky floor. Women also have to adapt to the changing times, to the changing circumstances, to want to go and work in these organizations, which were not necessarily open to before for them. So I think there's a lot of adaptation that needs to take place. There's a lot of communication with existing employees who are suddenly seeing, women come into the workforce in some organizations. And I think there's a lot of training and education that needs to take place. But it will happen. It will take its time. I think that the other thing that we need to think about is you said that there aren't many graduates, women graduates, but I'm not sure that's true. Maybe Mariam would know. But my knowledge is that, for example, you have one of the largest universities in the world for women in Saudi Arabia. So they're actually producing a lot of women graduates. It's just that they haven't necessarily been able to find the sort of jobs that Mariam is describing. So I think there is a demand. And there is a workforce, and of course, a very young workforce in Saudi Arabia. So I think it's a question of getting these two things to meet, and that will gradually happen, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And that's true for Saudi Arabia and for the rest of the world. And moving on, Dr. Mariam, how is the Red Sea Development Company building a future through corporate governance that's profitable for its shareholders and for its stakeholders alike?
Can I just go back to Jane's question before I respond to that?
Of course, yes, yeah.
I think what you said was that there are lots of graduates coming out of tertiary or university with university degrees, and that's true.
Yes.
I think one very encouraging thing that we have in Saudi, which we've had for a while, and the earliest adapters of it, is that Saudi Arabia's labor law does not allow discrimination in salaries based on gender. So equal pay is actually part of the law, and I think that's really encouraging as well. And it basically, means that females can come into the workplace knowing that, the law will protect their rights when it comes to their pay. So I think that's really encouraging as well for Saudi females going into the workplace.
Yes, that's great. Oh, sorry, yes?
No, that's it. And then on your question on can you just repeat the question, please?
Oh, yes. So for a long time, a big focus has been on companies' shareholders and sort of making sure that they are profiting from a company's success. But obviously, through sustainability, ESG, etc., companies are now looking at all stakeholders. Tell us how the Red Sea Development Company is building a future through corporate governance that's profitable for its shareholders, but also for stakeholders.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, if you talk to any CEO or any investor, they will always tell you that as attractive as ESG is, it's also problematic because it's expensive. I don't think anyone will, not agree with the fact that implementing ESG, implementing sustainability comes at a cost. However, the long-term return on that investment is important not only to the shareholders as it is now, but it's most important and most useful and beneficial to stakeholders. The sustainability is something that we take very seriously at the Red Sea Development Company. And early on, we took the decision to invest in ESG, to invest in sustainability. It means that, of course, it comes with a higher cost. However, our shareholder has a big interest in seeing that we have a big or that we do things sustainably. And we know that our stakeholders as well will benefit from this on the long term. So just like corporate governance has evolved in the rest of the world, with the focus not being anymore just on returns on investment from a financial perspective, we care a lot about the returns on all our stakeholders, whether they're our employees, our consumers who are the tourists coming to the destinations, our suppliers, or the local communities where we're building the projects. So it was very important to us, and we built this into our business plans, into our strategies from day one, that this project will be sustainable. We will focus on the environmental sustainability, but also the social and economic sustainability, to ensure that our suppliers won't find out all of a sudden that we've disappeared or that we've gone bust. The local communities will know that they will have a better livelihood coming their way, whether it's in the creation of jobs or us, bringing business to them. Of course, our employees know that also they'll have jobs with us for the long term. We've built it into, as I mentioned, our strategies, our business plans. We've built it into our all the way down to our policies, into our code of conduct, business ethics, to ensure that we are long-term, sustainable, we're fair, and we're transparent in all our business dealings. So we hope that that would ensure that not only our shareholders has long-term returns on their investment, but also our stakeholders.
So Jane, what are the biggest trends in corporate governance that you're seeing right now in the Middle East, and how will this have a direct influence on corporate governance in Saudi Arabia specifically?
I think that the trends that we're seeing in the Gulf specifically are increasing regulation, as I mentioned before, in order to, achieve Vision 2030, open up the economy. We need the best regulations possible to give that framework for it. And we're seeing the regulators meet those demands that are there in terms of providing the frameworks and bringing the frameworks up to international standards and best practice. I think that the governance of risk is a hot topic. It's the same everywhere in the world, but I think here there's a huge focus on cybersecurity. We know we're one of the biggest targets in the world because traditionally we had lax security. That has changed, but we're still a big target because of the wealth in the region as well. So risk is always on the top of the agenda, but I think we're seeing an increasing focus on that. We're seeing board evaluations become a more frequent occurrence now for boards to be evaluating themselves and do external board evaluations. And that in turn is a sort of positive cycle as they continuously improve their governance. We're seeing the role of what they call here the board secretary. You might call it the corporate secretary. I think being reevaluated more and more as a chief governance officer, unless it's just the secretary to the board, and that's something that's also extremely positive. And I think last but by no means least, the topics that we've covered already. Mariam has eloquently talked about sustainability and what the Red Sea Development Company are doing, and that's a true example model of what we'd like to see all companies doing, clearly. But it's a really hot topic, and I think that ESG is the words on every board at the moment. And deciding, they're less advanced, many of them, than the Red Sea Development Company, and deciding how to apply that within their organization and embed it in their strategy Gender diversity we've mentioned, although I would say that that's not reached the board agenda particularly yet, because the C-suite is not, the pipeline is not there, but it's still an issue. And I think, therefore, this is a circle where you see trends from the outside, because foreign direct investors coming in are looking at the governance. We're looking at what's happening on the outside, if you like, of the Gulf and saying, well, this is coming our way. So the regulators are changing the framework, and that has a circular effect on the companies and the corporate governance. But I think in terms of adopting best practices, it's definitely on the agenda now. I think there's no doubt about it. And there's no listed company that can ignore that. And as Mariam said, a lot of private companies are looking at how they can be better governed organizations, as well as the ministries and the public sector as well.
Yes, so let's focus on sustainability now, as you've both mentioned already, but let's hone in on that. Dr. Mariam, when you're building a new luxury tourist destination, how do you ensure that the project remains as environmentally friendly as possible, not just during the construction, but in a long-lasting way?
Well, we started very early on with our planning to ensure that what we build and where we build will not affect the environment in any negative way. Our ambition was always to preserve and enhance the destination so that it can be enjoyed for future generations to come and for many years to come. Early on, we got involved with, we began an extensive marine spatial planning exercise, which we undertook with King Abdullah University for Science and Technology, KAUST. And that exercise helped us identify which areas need to be or are worth conservation and which are suitable for development. As a result, we decided to leave about 75% of the islands untouched and to conserve them. And we will only be developing about less than 1% of the islands. And we also identified 9 islands that will be special conservation or designated in the special conservation zone. Our ambition is that by the end of 2040, we will reach a 30% net conservation, and we're very proud of that ambition. Many of our initiatives also include ways to protect and enhance the environment, and they include things like off-site manufacturing, because manufacturing on-site creates a lot of debris and a lot of pollution. Also, we've engaged with companies to provide us with green concrete. And we have overall a lot of standards from GRESB to many other standards that ensure that how we're building and all our suppliers all must comply with ensuring that they help us construct and build a place that hopefully will give more to the environment rather than cause any negative consequences for our environment. And of course, as I mentioned earlier in this interview, this is not necessarily the most profitable approach, but we know it's the right approach for us to take. And so that's why we've chosen to go down this path.
That's very encouraging to hear. And on that note, Jane, most large corporations and governments, in fact, around the world have vowed to reach net zero by 2050. Saudi Arabia is, of course, one of the world's biggest oil producers. How will it be able to move away from fossil fuels and make sustainability a huge part of its economy? And can you give us a few examples of companies that you are working with that are at the forefront of this?
So I think, listen, this is a major undertaking for the world, not just for the region. And I think that a lot of countries are still coming to terms with how they're going to achieve that. Clearly, we live in a region that has been dependent upon oil for, since it existed. So the challenges are different in different regions. But I think that there is a realization that things need to change, will change. I think that most large companies and particularly those that are oil dependent, are working on transition programs if they don't already have them. And I think that at the same time, they're also looking at the opportunities that sustainability and things like renewable energy have to offer. So I think this is work in progress. I think we are in this transition phase. And that's really what is at the heart of Vision 2030 at the end of the day. That is exactly what it's all about. And I think you see companies like the Red Sea Development Company who are leading the way. Clearly, it's probably, I'm not saying it's easy, because when you listen to Mariam and what they're doing, it's incredibly complicated. But nevertheless, they don't necessarily have the legacy that some organizations have in terms of changing the way they do things. And I think that's a bit more difficult, clearly. But I think it is, the region is on the move. There is no doubt about that. There is a lot of talk about sustainability, renewable energy, and new projects in the region. And we work with some companies that are, we're on the governance side, we're not on the business side of things, but we work with companies like Aquapower, Vision Invest, that have been doing this for a long time. And it's great to be, dealing with companies like the Red Sea Development Company, who are relatively new companies, but are starting off with this whole sustainability vision from the beginning. And that's really exciting, I think.
Absolutely. And speaking of renewable energy, Dr. Mariam, will solar power play a large part of the Red Sea project sustainability plans?
Yes, absolutely. We plan not to connect to the national grid, which is, of course, a cheaper option. But unfortunately, it's not the clean energy option. So we've taken the decision to be powered 100% by renewable energy, with no connection to the national grid. And of course, it's an achievement that will allow us to become the world's largest battery storage facility. Energy will be generated via solar panels and wind turbines to meet the demand that we need for our destination. What we're trying to attempt to do here is probably one of the biggest, it is on a scale that was never attempted before. However, it means that we will reduce the CO2 emissions to the atmosphere, and hopefully will equate to around 500,000 tons per year of reduced emissions. So we're really looking forward to achieving that. But as Jane has mentioned, it is an ambitious target. It's a lot of work to be done, and it's expensive, but we believe it's the right thing.
Ambitious, and it's great to speak to you who are at the forefront of this. It's fantastic to hear. I've just got a question each for you, because I'm conscious we've run out of time, or we're running out of time. So Jane, it's been a challenging year, a year and a half even. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected corporate governance and put health and safety first in the Middle East?
So I think that like probably most countries or regions of the world, it's affected us all pretty much in the same way, I think, to a large extent. But I think that people here have been quick to react. What we've seen here is that, first of all, we had to move online, and the normal generation of board directors, I always say they're not digital natives. They would rather have their paper and face-to-face still, but this has made a huge change because they've all had to move online. And I think that all board directors have found that it wasn't quite so difficult after all, and that it's quite effective. And I'm sure that we will learn to keep online, but at least a hybrid model, if not fully back to face-to-face, I think. I think the other thing that has clearly changed, like everywhere else in the world, is that the workforce has had to move online. Now, some companies struggled with that. Other companies found it easier, depending on the business sector that you're in. But again, I think that is something that is probably here to stay with us, maybe not 100% working from home, clearly, but I think probably most companies are going to be adopting some sort of hybrid model moving forward. I think that health has always been high. Health and safety has always been high on the agenda of most companies in this region. And I think that what we're seeing, the difference is that it's not just about health and safety, but we're looking at well-being as well of people. and their families during COVID. And I think that's a challenge. I think we've all handled it in different ways, but well, generally speaking. But I think that I'm not sure that the well-being side of things is something that we've always handled as well in this region as we could. And that's something that I think that is still work in progress. But I think in terms of governance and the way boards work, I think it's thrown everything up in the air in many ways, because what we see is that was business continuity planning already in place? How good was the corporate governance? Because those companies that have survived or done well out of COVID in a way, or these challenges, are the ones that generally had good corporate governance practices in place already. But risk is high on the agenda, sustainability high on the agenda, talent management, because people are questioning what sort of place do we want to work in now. And I think, all these things are on the board agenda, plus all the uncertainty that is still with us because COVID is still here. And it's not going away soon, in my opinion. So I think boards have been working extremely hard during the last 18 months, and I think they're going to carry on working hard during the next couple of years.
And finally, Dr. Mariam, to wrap this fascinating discussion, Saudi Arabia is increasing as a tourist destination, and it's just introduced new tourist visas for about 50 countries. So what does the future hold for Saudi Arabia as a tourist destination?
Thank you, Leah. The e-visa was very well received, with about 350,000 requests for e-visas issued just weeks after it was launched. We believe that we now live in a world that is changing. Travelers really do care about the environment and want to do good while they travel. And by creating the destination that we're trying to create here, we hope that we'll be able to respond to those travelers that are looking for interesting new places to explore, as well as to satisfy the thirst of these travelers for exploring new places, finding out more about Saudi Arabia's hospitality culture, and experiencing also the abundance of beautiful sites in Saudi Arabia that haven't been open to the world before. And that's what we're really betting on.
Oh, well, I hope to be able to visit myself one day. Dr. Mariam and Jane, thank you so much for your time. That's all we have time for. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. It's been truly fascinating and inspiring to hear your thoughts. And for all of you watching, thank you for watching, and see you soon.